dinosaur exhibit tour, please gather over here around me. Real quick, I'm just going to check, was anybody here for the 2:30 exhibit tour? No, okay. Then we can just do that one again and you will have to see the tour that you would have seen back in Daytona. All right. Hi guys, how are you?
Good, how about you?
I'm okay, thanks for asking. You know, I mean, things have been better. I've recently I've had some personal problems. I'm kidding, I'm good, I'm great. So, that would be the weirdest thing if I just started going through just this whole spiel about my life. That'd be great. So, my name is Marty Hoffman. I'm going to be your tour guide. Now, a couple quick announcements before we begin this tour. First of all, unfortunately, this is as loud as this thing gets. So if you're having a hard time hearing, just move in closer. If you don't have a hard time hearing, I understand if you want to stay as far away from me as possible. I get that. Next, and this is very important, I will take all questions and comments at the very end of the tour. So if we're at a scene, you have a question that's just burning in your brain, lock it away, hold on to it. At the end of the tour, I'll be happy to answer all of those questions for you. Now, before I begin this tour, I'm going to tell you guys some boring facts about dinosaurs just to get us all on the same page. How does that sound?
Great.
All right. Doesn't matter, I'm doing it anyway. So, what makes a dinosaur a dinosaur? Well, dinosaurs all have several things in common. They are all descendants of reptiles. They all lay hard shell eggs. A lot of them now we're finding out had feathers. But a key thing about dinosaurs that most people don't realize, dinosaur hip bones are very important. You see, dinosaur hip bones always rest directly on top of the leg bone. And this is one of the reasons dinosaurs can grow so large, because all that weight is being supported with the legs directly underneath it. Not like a crocodile or a lizard where the legs splay out to the side. Now, if I repeat these things to you rather quickly, hip bones on top of leg bones, laying hard shell eggs, having feathers, what modern group of animals does this sound like? Birds, exactly. In fact, birds are dinosaurs. Birds are what we call avian dinosaurs, and they're part of the theropod family. That's the same family that Tyrannosaurus Rex is a part of. In fact, some paleontologists believe that the closest living relative of a Tyrannosaurus Rex is a chicken. A chicken. Now this is awesome because this means whereas you guys never really have to worry about being eaten by a dinosaur, you guys eat dinosaurs all the time. And for your information, they taste just like chicken. But chickens are so closely related to their old dinosaur kinfolk that some scientists have started to study the embryos inside chicken eggs. And at one point in that embryo's development, it has teeth and claws, and it looks pretty much like a little dinosaur. But then a genetic switch triggers that turns it into a chicken. Well, geneticists now are trying to go in and turn that switch off. So instead of a little chicken hatching from the egg, a little baby dinosaur will hatch from the egg. And I have very mixed feelings about this. Because as much as I want to see a cute little baby dinosaur, I, like you guys, have seen the movies, and I know it doesn't turn out very well. All right, you guys ready to go see some actual dinosaurs? All right. Just those two that went woo. The rest of you, we're done with you now. No, we're actually going to go and take a look at the oldest dinosaur we know of, right over this way.
Huh?
Didn't really listen, now they're uncomfortable because they know that they are singing about him. All right, over here. Cool. All right, so here we are in the Triassic, the earliest age of the dinosaur. And if you're curious what the oldest dinosaur we know of is, it's this little blue guy right here. That is Eoraptor. Now, Eoraptor lived about 231 million years ago, and he's thought to be the oldest dinosaur. Now, they have found some bone fragments that they think might be older than Eoraptor, but there's no way to know if they're dinosaur bones or not. And once again, it comes down to those crazy dinosaur hip bones. I told you earlier that the dinosaur hip bones always rest directly on top of the leg bones, but that little socket that the ball joint would fit in, it has to be open in the back. If it's not a dinosaur. And whereas we have found some bone fragments, haven't found any hip bones, so there's no way to know if it's an earlier dinosaur than Eoraptor, or just one of the many reptiles that were around before the time of the dinosaurs. So right now, little Eoraptor from Argentina holds the record. Maybe not for much longer. In Madagascar, they recently found a Plateosaur that they think might be even older than Eoraptor. So we'll have to wait and see if he holds onto his title or not. Now, the next dinosaur we're going to talk about is kind of strange because, well, it's not a dinosaur. It's this big long guy here in the back. That is Desmatosuchus. Desmatosuchus is not a dinosaur. He's actually more closely related to a crocodile than a dinosaur. Now you'll see he has those osteoderms or body armor on his back. Well, he's also armored on his underside, which makes him very difficult to attack. Another thing that would make him difficult to attack is the fact that that body armor goes all the way down to the tip of his very long tail, and I can only assume that if that tail hits you, it hurts a lot. Now, those spikes on his back, they're a little bit of a mystery. Now, the ones on his neck make sense, because if a larger predator is going to try to attack you, they're going to try to bite your neck. So having spikes on your neck, not a bad plan. But those two longer spikes, we're not sure what they were used for. It may be a form of sexual dimorphism where you can tell males from females. Or may just be a way to recognize an individual in the group, like, oh, that's Herb over there. He's got the kind of bent spike. We like Herb. He's good people. Honestly, we just don't know. A dinosaur in this scene we know a whole lot about are these two guys right here. Those are Dilophosaurus. And thanks to a place called Ghost Ranch Quarry in New Mexico, we have over 1,000 specimens of Dilophosaurus. Now that's incredibly rare. In most cases, any single species of dinosaur only represented by a handful of partial skeletons. In fact, in some cases, a single species only represented by a handful of bones. And from those few bones, we determined what the entire dinosaur looked like. So there can be a lot of speculation that goes on in paleontology. But because we have over 1,000 of these guys, maybe 100 full skeletons, we know about as much about this dinosaur as the bones can tell us. But you'll see as we go through this exhibit, some dinosaurs are leaving even more behind than just bones, and that can tell us a lot more about what dinosaur life was actually like. Next, we're going to go take a look at a dinosaur that paleontologists have gotten things wrong about a lot. Right over this way. Security. Yes. He's crazy. He's got that little hyena laugh that he'll come at you with. There's a little woodpecker with a green sword right there is what it is. All right. So, IB is Stegosaurus. And from the time of his discovery, Stegosaurus has become kind of famous for how many times paleontologists have gotten things wrong about him. For instance, when they first found this dinosaur, they thought for sure that it would walk on its hind legs. But if you take a look at it now, it makes a lot more sense it'd be walking on all fours. But if you can picture this dinosaur standing up on its hind legs, you can better understand how this dinosaur, Iguanodon, and Tyrannosaurus rex were the three dinosaurs that were the inspiration for the movie monster, Godzilla. Ever wonder where Godzilla got those plates on his back? It was inspired by Stegosaurus. Now, the next problem they had with this dinosaur was its brain. You see, when they found its skull, they realized it only left enough room for a brain about the size of a walnut. And they wondered how such a large animal could survive with such a small brain. But then they found another mass in his hips. And they thought, wow, this dinosaur had two brains. But no, this dinosaur had one teeny tiny little brain. In fact, in proportion to the size of its body, one of the smallest brains of any animal that's ever lived. Meaning, if ignorance is bliss, then and this is the happiest animal that has ever walked the planet. With the possible exception of a couple Kardashians. Now, on its back, you'll see those plates. And when they first found this dinosaur, they named the dinosaur, found those plates, they named the dinosaur Stegosaurus, which means roofed lizard, because they thought those plates lay flat on its back like roofing tiles. But as they found more, they started to realize those plates probably stood up. But they still thought those plates may be used for defense. And there are several problems with those plates being used for defense. First of all, they're kind of poorly positioned for defense. You'll see the entire side of the dinosaur is left wide open to attack. The next problem? They're just too thin. See, that is an Allosaurus. He was the apex predator of the Jurassic time period, and his bite force? More than enough to snap through any one of those plates. The biggest problem, however, with those plates being used for defense, is as you can kind of see, those plates have blood vessels going up into them. Now, you do not want your armor to bleed. That is bad, because if Allosaurus bites one of those in half or tears one of those off, then you run the risk of bleeding to death. So now it is believed that those plates were probably used for body temperature regulation. The animal gets too hot, he pumps blood up into those plates, the wind blowing through cools it off like a radiator. Or perhaps in the cool morning, maybe angle himself towards the sun to warm his blood. Now, there's been a big debate as to whether or not dinosaurs were cold-blooded or warm-blooded. But the truth is they may have been somewhere in the middle, what's known as a mesotherm. And it's not a cold-blooded animal, but it is an animal that cannot regulate its body temperature as well as mammals can. But that's still just one theory about those plates. Some paleontologists think that those veins might have actually changed the color of the plates, and it might have been used as a signaling system. Perhaps red means I'm angry, stay back, or purple means hey, I'm in a mood for love. We really just don't know. One thing we do know for sure, those spikes on the end of its tail, those were definitely used for defense. In fact, they actually found an Allosaurus tailbone with a big hole in it. And that hole precisely fits one of those Stegosaurus spikes. That means this guy was swinging his tail with enough force to drive bone through bone. And that's really impressive. Now, what I will find really impressive is if any one of you can answer this next question correctly. Because I've asked it literally hundreds and hundreds of times, and so far 22 people have gotten the answer correct. The one that impressed me the most was a 4-year-old little boy. Can anybody here tell me what the tail end of this dinosaur is called? It is called a thagomizer. Thagomizer. A 4-year-old knew the word thagomizer. So how are your parenting skills doing? No, I was pretty much blown away as well. Now, thagomizer sounds like a really scientific term. It was actually coined by Gary Larson. Gary Larson is the cartoonist that used to draw the Far Side comic strips back in the 1980s. And in one of his cartoons, he had a picture of a professor caveman standing in front of a group of student cavemen. He's got his pointing stick, he's pointing at a projection screen with the tail end of this dinosaur portrayed on it. And he's like, this end of the dinosaur is known as the thagomizer, named after the late Bag Simmons. Well, paleontologists thought that cartoon was so funny, they actually named the tail end of this dinosaur the thagomizer, and now it is a real scientific paleological term. Alright, are you guys ready to see the most impressive dinosaur on the tour? Woo! Alright, he's right there. Right, yeah, he kind of looks like a chicken. Looks a little like a duck. Kind of the original turducken right there. That is Anchiornis. Now, Anchiornis is impressive for one reason. With a lot of these dinosaurs, we can tell you some pretty cool things about them. Some of these dinosaurs look like they have fur. What they actually have are proto-fur, or a downy kind of feather. Like a chick would have. And we know they had them because we actually found imprints of those feathers at the fossil site. There's a dinosaur over there named Carnotaurus. He's got bumps all over his skin. We know we had those bumps because we were lucky enough to find a fossilized imprint of his skin, and those bumps were present. But what we cannot tell you about almost any one of these dinosaurs is what color they were. We just don't know. Except for little Anchiornis. We have a really good idea what color he was. Now, how is that possible? Well, Anchiornis was found in China. And in China, a lot of the dinosaurs are being found in volcanic ash. Now, volcanic ash is so fine that when you leave an imprint of, let's say, a feather in it, gives you almost microscopic detail of that feather. Now, the color of any feather, modern-day bird or dinosaur alike, are determined by little structures at the base of the feather called melanosomes. And different shapes and orientations of those structures represent different colors. So by comparing the structures of this guy's feathers to that of modern-day birds, we know that this guy was black, white, with a little red crest on his head. And for an animal that lived 160 million years ago, that's really impressive. Since you're not as blown away as you should be, but that's just fine. Next, we're going to go look at an animal with some star power. He became famous in the first Jurassic Park movie, right over this way.
Black, white, red, and
That might have been me. I'll try to take another nap sometime. Yeah, okay, well, sure, I feel better. Is anybody getting too close to me? Is my guard doing okay? All right.
You're gonna take your brother out.
All right. So, the dinosaur I brought you over here to see is this big guy right here. But, before I show you him, I want to point out this little guy right over here with the single crest on his head. Now, this is Guanlong over here. Now, the reason I wanted to point out Guanlong is a couple-fold. First of all, I want to talk about his name, Guanlong. Now, Guanlong comes from China. And a lot of the dinosaurs in China have long somewhere in their name. And that's because in Chinese, long means dragon. So, like a lot of our dinosaurs here have saurus somewhere in the name, which means reptile or lizard. A number of theirs have long, which means dragon. The other thing I wanted to point out about this dinosaur is that little single crest on his head. Now, paleontologists aren't exactly sure what that crest was used for, but they believe it was probably used to attract a mate. And that may very well be the case. However, paleontologists use that answer a lot. And I don't know what's going on with paleontologists. I don't know if they're just really lonely or what, but it seems like anytime they find something on a dinosaur they're not sure of, their immediate go-to answer is, well, chicks dig it. So this is Guanlong, and apparently chicks dig him. Now this is Dilophosaurus. Dilophosaurus he's got two crests on his head, so apparently chicks dig him twice as much. Now, Dilophosaurus became famous in the first Jurassic Park movie. I don't know if you guys remember the scene or not, so I will reenact it for you. Dilophosaurus spreads out his neck frill. He spits poison right in Newman's face. Newman manages to scramble up into his Jeep. The Dilophosaurus hops into the passenger seat of the Jeep and attacks him.
Yeah.
Well, there are several problems with the scene the way I've described it. First of all, the character's name wasn't Newman. That's a character he played on Seinfeld. And if you missed the joke, I'm sorry, but it's an awesome joke. No, first of all, no dinosaur ever has been shown to have neck frills. They just don't exist in the dinosaur kingdom. The next problem? This is the actual size of a Dilophosaurus. He does not fit in the passenger seat of a Jeep. Even if you're driving around in a Hummer, sorry about your midlife crisis, he's still not fitting in your passenger seat. And the next problem is, this dinosaur never spit poison or acid or venom or anything of that nature. Now, how do we know this? Well, take a look at the claws on his feet. Now, take a look at the claws on his hands. Now, take a look at his mouth, which just happens to be filled with steak knives. There is no reason for this dinosaur to need poison. It would be like saying a crocodile needs poison. In fact, even in modern-day poisonous animals, let's say a scorpion. If you find a scorpion with really big pinchers, chances are a stinger, not that bad. But if you find a scorpion with teeny tiny little pinchers, watch out, because that stinger is going to have a huge poison sac next to it, because that's what that scorpion uses to immobilize prey. The other scorpion just uses his large pincers to immobilize prey. Well, this guy had every tool he needed to immobilize anything he would have been hunting for in the late Triassic, early Jurassic time period. So sorry, Jurassic Park, no poison. All right, next we're going to go look at arguably the largest meat-eating dinosaur that has ever existed, right over here.
Every time I try to fend myself,
I'm back over here. You're trying to get my picture. I was with Park Ranger LB, you're right. I had some little girl come up and tell me that Park Ranger LB was his girlfriend, or her girlfriend.
how does I think I'm on TV too? I think on TV. Well,
Yep, that was me.
fuck you.
I'm very famous. Alright, I'm crushing in the 4 to 7-year-old market. Amazing. Alright, so behind me is Giganotosaurus. Now, Giganotosaurus is arguably the largest carnivore we have ever discovered. Now, our Giganotosaurus is not full